Hey, stop it. People get to walk by with their dogs without you yelling at them. Go on. Go on. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Nicely stretched out now. And now it's just a matter of getting in here, swirling my way around. Nibble, nibble, nibble. That's the name of the game when it comes to doing bigger, deeper forms like this. You can see I've already carved about as much bowl as you'd get in a typical eating spoon. Got a ways to go yet, though. I always like to start in the middle and work my way out to the edges as I go. I feel like if you start at the edge, work your way into the middle, you know how carving the center of something that's a big lump is always a pain in the neck? Feels like you're only exaggerating that thing when you start at the edge and then work your way into the middle and you still have that big lump in the middle. It's like you've made the big lump even bigger and more of a pain in the neck. Whereas if you start in the middle and tackle that shallow lump to begin with, then by the time you get around, it's less of a deal, less of a big deal. So right now I'm looking at this from here and thinking I should probably draw a pencil line of what I want the outside line to be so that I don't carve my bowl beyond that. So this is just going to help me stay on target, and I'm just going to essentially look at it and then draw. That's that. I have to decide how much I want it to be round versus oblong. I'm going to go for fairly round. I like the idea of this thing being, I probably won't get it to be exactly round, but I like the idea of it being pretty round. There we go. Good. Good. Okay. Good. How does it look from there? All right, so now you can see I've redrawn. You see those pencil lines? I'm not sure you can. There you go. I've redrawn the outline to smooth it out so that when I'm carving the center of the bowl, I stay away. Now, I don't usually carve the sort of the inner rim, but I guess in this instance I will, just so there's no confusion on my part about how far I'm going. So now I actually need to figure out how far I'm going to try and take the bowl here, because if I make the inner rim consistent, then I have a lot of handle to remove here. See, if I pull this all the way down to there, then I've got a lot of handle to remove. So if I'm going to redraw that line to have it be there and then just take off a little bit of the handle. So drawing the inner rim now, something I don't normally do. I was able to save that one, so that's good. The whole thing will end up on my YouTube channel later on this afternoon. Now I'm not really concerned. You see how here I'm drawing this rim, but it's on a slanted piece? That's fine. That'll get resolved later when I recarve the top of the rim to have it be the way I want it to be. I'm not really concerned about that right now. That'll get resolved. Right now, I want to concern myself with hollowing. And we'll see. It might be that I end up sort of getting as deep as I can get and being like, you know what? It's not worth trying to get all the way down to here with the hollowing. It's just not worth it. So we'll see. I will end up adjusting the outside in reaction to what is possible on the inside of the bowl here. You set your alarm for the wrong time. That's okay, Chet. This is going to go on for a while yet. And I was able to save the other one, so you can watch that some other time. But I do talk my way through. I think it was you that asked me to do this, Chet, where you asked me to do a new form to me and talk through my thought process of how I adjust my process to figure out a new form. So that's what I'm doing here. This is this ladle I've had in the back of my head. I think we talked about this ladle, didn't we? There we go. Good. And how to get in here? I think maybe like this. Yeah, I think this one's gonna turn out cool. And it's fun to do something that I have no idea quite what I'm doing at this stage. So you can see I'm just nibbling my way down in. But you can also see that I'm trying to be sort of consistently go around and sort of move everything down at the same time. So I'm not letting there be any huge high spots that aren't coming down at the same time. It's a new wood too. Well, this cherry is all I really have that's good enough to do this with. Will this form allow to clear the last bit out? Do you mean in terms of getting deep, or do you mean in terms of getting the hook knife to not hit the handle? I'm not sure what you mean, Twinkle Toes Toes. That's a fun name to say. So, there we go. I'm edging my way out to that rim as I'm driving it down. So I'm doing both at once and trying to keep a consistent open curvature as I go down so that there's no one spot. Allow me to get the last little bit of something out of a pan. Probably not with this point, honestly. But I don't know any ladles that can do that anyways, right? I mean, they have a pot that has a sharp side and no ladle is going to get in and get that last little bit out of the last side. But yeah, I do want to have it be fairly shallow, and we'll see. I'm suspecting that I'm going to run out of patience for how tough this is before it runs out of depth. And we'll adjust that when I get there. Woo! I was kind of thinking about this, like essentially what I want to do is do something that's like a ladle you would make if you had a giant piece of bamboo, right? And you just like used a section of the bamboo as the cup, and then you had this side of the bamboo go up. But then I like having this little tail flip here. All right. So one of the things I've figured out when it comes to speed in carving is that if you can keep yourself from just sort of sitting and turning it over and over in your lap, that saves a lot of time. If you can be taking little nibbling cuts as you think about something, because as nice as it is to sort of sit and contemplate, it's the actual carving that makes something happen. Yeah, punch bowl type ladle. Yeah, something like that. I'm envisioning it for something that's like where you're not trying to get the last little bit out of a pan. You're using it to like serve something or test something, or I don't know. Haven't thought that part through as thoroughly yet. Mostly just trying out this design conceit with the wide, narrow handle, which I have to say I'm really loving at this point. It feels super strong, super strong. But look at that crank. So, yeah. Now you can hear that chattering as I go down in this part. I can't actually show you because of the way it's angled. But as I'm going from this angle, there's chatter marks. And partly that has to do with the grain. Partly it has to do with how steep I'm trying to go, but mostly it has to do with grain. It's telling me, the chatter marks are telling me that it really would prefer to be cut from any direction other than what I'm cutting it. But because that handle's there, tough luck. Starting out with spoon carving. Any advice on what brand of axe and tools to purchase? Let me ask you some follow-up questions. Are you the type of person who would like to try something on the cheap and then gradually build your way up to buying exactly the right tools, even though they're expensive? Or would you rather save the money that you're going to spend on the cheap tools and just buy the right tools right off the bat? Either one is fine, but it will definitely influence what I recommend. And if you're going to say that you're the type of person who would rather find some sort of middle way, There's kind of a middle way, but not really a good middle way. I think you should either do the cheap thing or the right thing, the sort of final thing that you'll need to do, or go for super cheap at the beginning. But there's no like, oh, you can buy these tools and be happy carving for years with them because they're okay. That just doesn't really exist. Yeah, this quadrant right here is a real pain in the neck. It's a pain in my neck. All right. Can of worms alert. Yeah, right. Wait, did someone say something? Yeah, that is a can of worms. Buy the right tools right away. Okay. So, when it comes to axes, there's a number of good axes out there. With different amounts of lead time, and I've only had experience with some of them. I have had experience with the Granfors Brooks large Swedish carving axe, and I've come to love its size and its weight. That being said, I know that the Hans Carlsen axe is an excellent axe, and I also know that the Liam Hoffman axe is an excellent axe, although it has a super long waiting time, and the Hans Carlsen can be hard to get your mitts on also, because I think they're released in batches. There's a new person on the scene, Julia Kalthoff, who I am super interested in her axes, and she might be a good way to go. But I also know that you can get the large Swedish carving axe. I would not buy it from Amazon, because what I've heard is that buyers who sell on Amazon tend to buy lots of seconds and then essentially pass them off to people as though they were as good as the regular ones. So if you're going to buy a Granfors Brooks large Swedish carving axe, I would get the symmetrical grind. And if you're in the US, I would reach out to Joel Larabelle, who's a registered dealer, and or just to the company directly. When it comes to saws, I much prefer the Silky saws, particularly the Silky XL21 is what I use. I love the way it has the two angles that you can lock it in. I find that very helpful for not overcutting the underside of the stop cuts. And the amount of aggressiveness of that saw is perfect, in my view, for my needs. The other slightly less expensive but equally good one, as far as I can tell, that I've seen is the Corona Quick Saw, which has the similar features and similar aggressiveness. But because it's Corona instead of Silky, is probably 10, maybe $20 cheaper. When it comes to sloids and hook knives, I am totally biased because I get to be the guinea pig and have input into the work of Matt White. He's a bladesmith in New Hampshire, and he's also my business partner with the Spoonosaurus magazine. How the forearms holding up? They're doing okay now. This kind of work that you have to do at the beginning is much harder than simply holding it still and twisting the whole thing. So once I get to this stage, this is actually pretty easy because I'm twisting my whole arm and it's less sort of so this feels like I could go for a while, and it's also smoothing out. You can actually hear it smoothing out as I'm starting to go deeper in and the cut is starting to be angled. It's no longer just going straight across end grain. Instead, it's kind of catching the wood at an angle, and it's helping out. Yeah, so right, Truck's point is an excellent one. Basically, the thing that's going to make the biggest difference is getting a hook knife, like a really good hook knife. That's where I would, if you are limited for funds, that's where I'd spend my money, is getting a really good hook knife. So I work with Matt to make his hook knives as good as we can possibly make them, and largely that's Matt's thing, but I get to have ideas and run them past him, and sometimes he incorporates them, and largely sort of what this knife is incorporates a lot of ideas that I've had in the past over hook knives. The other thing I really like about Matt's approach is that you can just order stuff. whereas a bunch of the other makers either have wait lists that you have to, like really long wait lists, or and Matt has a wait list. You can order stuff and then you have to wait a couple months. But like Nick Westerman, you get on the wait list, and then there's like a long time before you can even place an order, and then you can place an order for up to a certain number of tools, and they come without handles. Reed, I believe, is doing small batch releases, and I'm not sure how Pinewood Forge is doing it, nor what their wait time is. So, one of the things that I like that Matt does is that you can just order the tool you want and then sit back and wait, and then it will arrive without having to sort of play any games when it comes to scrambling with other people trying to buy tools. I'm not really a scrambler, so that definitely fits my temperament better. So you can see that now I'm trying to get this inside to be even. Oh yeah, good. Yeah, Chuck is weighing in. Thank you. And Rachel, if you're just buying one of Matt's Lloyd knives, which would I go for? Bevel and length? I chat with him earlier and think you've made a decision. Happy for others. Pennyworth too. Rachel, the one question I'd have for you, normally I just recommend that people get the Pro Grind Sloyd because that's what I use and that's what I prefer. But I just had a lesson with a woman who had fairly small hands, and she much preferred the length of the Sauhegan. That was the shorter length. Now, it might be that she was just uncomfortable with the length and would have gotten used to it, but she said that certain pivot cuts were easier for her to do with the slightly shorter blade. And I could see how having shorter hands would mean that, sorry guys, this isn't even in view. I could see how having shorter hands would make it so that having shorter hands would make it so that a slightly shorter blade would be the way to go. That being said, I would go for whatever angle. I'm not going to spout an angle because I'm not entirely sure. I would go for whatever angle is on the Pro Grind Sloyd, unless you're going to be carving like lots of end grain. But even then, I don't know. Matt was saying that me struggling with that walnut a couple weeks back it would have been easier if I'd used a slightly fatter angle. But you have Moras that have a fatter angle, so I would go with the thinner angle of the Pro Grind as a complement to what you already have. Yeah, so cherry wood I find very forgiving. It's fairly mellow, especially the stuff I carve, compared to like birch or beech. I'm sorry, compared to beech or maple or walnut, certainly. It's not quite as easy to carve as birch, but it will take a cleaner finish more easily. So it sort of straddles the line between those two sets of woods, the harder ones that take a cleaner finish and the softer ones that don't take as clean a finish or are more finicky about the finish they take. Yeah, and this is black cherry. I think other species of cherry really vary widely in how easy they are to carve and what sort of finish they take. Program Bevel 26. I mean, I'm pretty picky about the wood I carve. It also seems like you're pretty picky about the wood you carve, Rachel, so it might be totally fine. I think Matt's concern is more like selling a knife that's relatively delicate like that to somebody who might just take it against a piece of dry oak, right? It's not going to hold up as well. But if you're as picky as I think you are about the wood that you choose to carve, I think you're not going to have a problem. It's called the Pro Grind Sloyd because it's designed with professionals like you and me in mind who are picky about the wood we carve and understand sort of those variables and how important they are to edge retention, for example. So I really think you would be fine. And I think, not only would you be fine, you would also then have the benefit of getting to use a very slicey knife like that, which I find is a lot easier on my body. Okay, so Chuck, you can see how I've ended up being able to get in here, but it has kind of gouged out a little bit this thickness here. So it's good that I left that there, so then I can let that sort of react. Now I'm going to clean up this rim here before I go any further, so I can tell what needs to happen with that regard. So, sheathe the old knife. I mean, Rachel, for instance, I basically use this. This is the Pro Grind Sloyd, and I basically use this for everything. Yeah, I think it's while it is potentially more easy to damage than a stouter edge, you get the benefit of having it be much slicier. And, you know, if you're not trying to scrape out a knot in the wood, or carve something that's overly dry, or carve a species that's just hard on stuff, you're going to be just fine. So, all right, so now I'm doing this little transition here. So I do that with just the tip. Driving me crazy, you didn't see the first part. There's so many questions about how I got there. Well, ask them, Chet. I'm here. Ask the question. What are you wondering? All right, so now I'm just gonna kind of get those two things to be about the same. And all right, I kind of like that. That curve is really sweet. Did I do the handle on the shave horse? No, I didn't. So what I did, and this was actually interesting, was I saw on the full billet that was full width, I sawed in from the side and split it out, and then in from the side and split it out. So I had two nice pieces. I'm gonna get the spoons I'm doing. I have a lesson. Ben Strano from Fine Woodworking is coming for a lesson tomorrow, and we're gonna carve those into spoons. And so then I split that out, and then what did I do? Oh yeah, and then I sawed down and split the handle out, and that way I had to do very little chopping across the end grain. I did almost no chopping across the end grain. It worked really well. And then I roughly drew the thing, and then I kind of chopped down to get the outline, and then once I chopped it down, then I rounded all the way around to get there, and then I did the back as well. And the end plan for the handle is to leave it, I want to try and get it as thin and delicate as I can, because the width is going to keep it super strong. So I think the key to this whole thing feeling delicate is how thin I can make this here. But I don't want to push it too thin until I see, I want to essentially get the bowl as clean as I can, and then, because you can see how I'm kind of digging in here, right? So I don't want to do any work on this until I resolve what needs to happen to the center of the bowl. And this is one of those scenarios where, because it's a new form and I don't know sort of what, a lot of times the final shape and dimensions of new forms are dictated by like the curvature of the hook knife. It'll want to do one particular set of curvature and not another. And so that's why you see that particular curvature on that form when I do it. It's dictated by sort of what the tools are willing to do. The width of my other ladles, the what are they called? The ostrich ladle, is that width is dictated by the length of this blade and how wide of a pivot cut I can do to get across the rim. So from the midway point of there to where the tip is, that's how wide the ostrich ladle is. So similarly, I'm sort of feeling out where the tool limitations are for this form and trying not to let there be any limitations from having removed wood too early on in the process. Yeah, and like some of those splits I had to do them in stages so that they wouldn't run down into the wrong side, right? So you have to be mindful that split is always going to run towards the side with less material, and sometimes it means you got to split off the waste material in 2 stages or even 3 stages depending on your scenario. So being mindful of that is the key. All right, coming in from this side, doing that same sort of twisty motion. See if I can get a similar thing going on. So this is partly why I left the handle wide, so that I can make it, see how that doing the curvature made the handle slightly narrower? So that's important. Now I'm just gonna be a little more finicky about the rim, trying to get it flat and even. And I'm even, no pun intended, I'm even gonna use a pencil to show me what even looks like. Okay, okay, a little more. I'm a big one for pencils, as you can see with the pencil exactly where I need to go to. So I'm aiming to keep the width, well, I don't know, yeah, it's true, even Emmett does it. Terrible! I don't know, but I want to keep my options open. So how thin do I tend to go on the rim? From the top view. Quite thin. This is way too fat at this stage. So yeah, I'm mostly just sort of straightening it out so that I can then and notice that in retrimming the rim, now I'm going to have to go back with the pencil, and I'll put a sheath on my knife this time. I'm going to have to go back and redraw the sort of round shape that I had created before. And redraw that inner rim, because in flattening out the rim here, I've eliminated those marks, but those marks are important to keep me on track. So this is why new forms like this take so much time, because you don't know how far to push them, and you gotta kind of leave more material on than you think and creep up on the situation. Whew. Okay, that's much better. You see how relatively even that rim is now? Okay, good. Okay, so this is for you, Rachel. And now I'm going to redraw that round shape. Okay. Redraw the round shape. Da-da-da-da. And I might decide to spend a little time trimming around the outside as well before I go much more with the inside, just to make sure that when I'm feeling the thickness with my finger, that I'm getting a bit more of an accurate read. So I want to make this, I mean, ultimately I'm going to make this rim quite thin, because I think ladles are one of those designs that's useful to get the rim quite thin. So this inner rim that I'm drawing here is not meant to necessarily be accurate to how thick I want the rim to be in the end. It's more just to sort of keep me even. All right, so touche. So let's do a little more work with the Sloyd. And again, it's kind of, because I'm going essentially with the grain here. It's a matter of just kind of going from the edge like that. Ooh, super awkward. But fun. But super awkward. Okay. Good. So you can see what I'm doing is I'm just trimming around this outline here. There we go. And that will allow me to blend on the outside without worrying about what the, as long as I stay just slightly back from this bottom lip here, then I can do whatever blending I want and know that it will preserve this round shape here. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Almost done. That side. Good. I'm going to do this side. Now, the more I try and go around the rim like this, the more likely I am to actually split the wood. So I have to be careful and go up from the rim in this instance, which is really different from how I do any other form. So don't read too much into this. This is not how most spoons work. But again, it's a question of reading the grain and understanding what's happening. And if you start to make a knife cut and you're like, I don't know how this is going to finish, stop. Don't push on anyways and figure out how it finishes by watching, an hour's work disappear down the drain from one bad push. Trust that little voice in your head that's thinking that might not be a good idea. Particularly when that little voice in your head thinks that you're going to cut yourself, it's usually right. So listen to it. The one time I cut myself bad, I definitely had that little thought right before it happened of, this is a dumb idea. So I've come to learn to trust it. All right, so now, because I can just tell, you don't know if I hit pause, but when you were stretching, you vanished. Said the video. Yes, Jerry, that was I ran out of time. These videos can only be an hour long, and that was the hour mark. So we're about half an hour into the next one as well, and this is looking like it's going to be slightly more than that. So I might even have to do it again. We shall see. All right. So now I'm just trying to knock back these super rounded bits because, like I said, a ladle doesn't work particularly well if it's too steep at the sides. You end up having to tip it too far to get it to drain out. I learned this because some friends of ours have a ladle that has very shallow sides, like it's like the shallow V like this, and it just works so beautifully. So do I think I could have removed more with the axe? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, it just depends on sort of what. Yeah, I mean, I think in a prototype, you figure out what the shape can be, and to some extent, you're not pushing as far as you think you might go with anyone at any point because you don't want to blow right past the point that you should have stopped at without realizing it. So to some extent with a new form, you gotta go slowly and feel out what you're shooting for, because I've definitely tried new forms where I realized that I should have stopped way back, but I didn't. For whatever reason. So I'm mostly pushing this back now so that when I do the inside again, I have a more accurate read on how far I should go. Rah. One thing I will say, this extra wide handle is a delight to hold on to. Very comfortable. Okay, so slightly less pointy, but still symmetrical to the handle. Now you're into it and look back and know you could have axed more. Yes, yeah, and you can see that like this is like starting to look like a really nice ladle form now. So now I'm going to go back to doing more in the bowl. That sheath go. Here we go. Tell you a little secret. This sheath is a little bit too short for this knife, and you can see just the tiniest little bit of tip of the knife sticking up. But that's okay. So now I'm going to go back in and do more carving like this. I'm also going to rotate this whole sucker up. Come on. Come on. There we go. Yeah. Good. Okay. So all of the doing that other stuff has really helped rest my hand as well. And so now I can go into this, what will hopefully be the final or close to final round of hollowing with relatively fresh feeling hands. Yeah, these hook knives from Matt are worth the money, I would say. For sure. If I was going back to tell me 5 years ago when I started carving, you know, psst, you should spend some money on something. If these knives had existed back then, which they didn't, I would have told myself, go buy one. Isn't it crazy to think that these knives have basically existed like a little more than a year, and that's it? I don't know. To me, they're so integral to what I'm able to do that I can't imagine not having one. I was telling a furniture maker, I'll shift this so you can see what I'm doing. This is actually a pretty satisfying cut here. So, see how I'm pressing it into my chest, and then I'm bracing my finger here, and I'm essentially able to go like that on the inside. Very satisfying cut. I was having this conversation with the furniture maker about how the more I carve, the more I realize that what I'm able to do, I don't think it has much to do with any sense of skill that I have. I mean, there's some skill involved, but I really think that like the process that I figured out plus the tools that I have at my disposal are much bigger factors in the results I can get, which I think isn't really encouraging because it means that you can get them too. You just need to figure out, you know, the process that I figured out, or figure out your own process, and, you know, get as good tools as you possibly can get, and always be thinking, how can I make my tool situation better? How can I sharpen better? All that. And as you improve your process and your tools, you'll get better. And I think a lot of times people don't want to hear that. They want to believe that there's some sort of skill that you build up. But honestly, I think that the process you figure out and the tools you have at your disposal are much bigger contributors to the results you get than people really want to hear. All right, so how to get down in here is the question. Shift this back over like this. So it sort of feels like we're hitting maximum depth, not in most places in the spoon, over in this one spot right here. I am just interchangeable meat. That's how I feel, Chuck. I really do. I mean, I think people like to put skill up on a pedestal, but I am really thinking that like it's about being able to articulate a process, and it's about having good tools at your disposal and understanding how to use them. And I mean, you could call that the skill if you want to, but to my mind, that's very repeatable. I don't know if I agree with that, Jerry, actually. I think, you could hand me the tools I used to use and I would not be able to have the results that I have now. Yeah, I really think that the tools matter. Perhaps even more than the process, which is a little funny, but I was just able to get super clean finish on this. I couldn't do that with my old hook knife. It doesn't matter what technique you gave me or how well I was able to sharpen it. My old hook knife just couldn't do that. It wasn't stiff enough. It didn't have enough power. It wasn't able to get it as sharp, as reliably. So, yeah, I think I believe more so that things that really are special are the tools and the process you bring to bear on the tools and your understanding of that process, which I find tremendously empowering, right? It means that it's not that the part that is more uniquely me is like me coming up with a design. And even then I sort of feel like a lot of designs, like the more basic the design is, the more and just sort of universal it is. Right, and I think that like me being able to notice and articulate, Chuck, is the skill that maybe sets me apart from some other carver that would be harder to teach someone to have that sort of innate tendency. But compared to that, articulating how to carve a spoon and saying these are the tools that matter, I think that that's relatively easy, right? Right. It's true. It's both. It is dropping. Okay. Yeah, of course, Chet. A great example of this is that a number of days ago, I gave my younger daughter, who's 9, my camera and asked me to take some photos of her. And then a couple other days ago, I handed the camera to the 6-year-old. The 6-year-old had her take some pictures. And then I handed my camera to the 9-year-old the other day and had her take a couple pictures. They were great pictures. They were just as good as ones I would take. And I told her, hey, try zooming in close, try stepping closer so that it just shows from here to here. Make sure you're focused on the right thing. And I stood in a way so I knew the light exposure was going to work. But she snapped the picture and everyone wanted to say, oh, she's so talented. And I really don't think, I love my daughters to death. I think they're very talented in many things. I think the ability to take a nice picture with a good camera is not a talent. I think the ability to frame a good picture and to understand what makes for an interesting picture, that's a skill you develop. But the ability to take a good picture once you understand the framing and, can see that the light exposure, I'm trying to figure out which angle to approach this from. There's not as much talent there, I think, as our culture would lead us to believe. So I don't know. This has been my thinking lately. I think the thing that you bring to the table is how much work you've put into understanding the process and how much skin you put in the game in terms of improving your tool situation and your ability to use the tools that you have. Neither of which I'm particularly great at, right? I would not have the amazing tools I have today were it not for the generosity of others, I get to be the guinea pig for Matt, and my amazing axe was given to me by Brian Dunbar just out of the blue. So, so it's not like I had the foresight to see that that was going to be valuable and actually put my money where my mouth was. It just happened to me by chance and has afforded me the opportunity to see that it makes a huge difference. So that has now become my advice to people. Not because I lived it per se, but because by chance that's what happened to me. All right, so you see how I've now bottomed out the tool. I can't actually get the rim here and have the tool be in here. And while I can get in here, I'm starting to bottom out the tip of the tool while this is not actually up. So I am right about at the depth that I can get with this tool for this circumference. Is the wooden water conduit as important as the tool? Yes. That is the other thing, right? Like you could give me a piece of wood and I would struggle just like you to get a clean finish. And then I could give you this piece of wood and you would be like, shoot, man, I'm getting a really clean finish. So it's the understanding that this is possible and then putting in the time to hunt down the right piece of wood and putting in that effort is also really, really crucial. All right, so now I'm trying to clean up this inner surface as best I can and walk away. So trying to smooth out the curvature. Thankfully, I'm largely smooth all the way around. Good. That is as clean a bowl as I can make. Is there a little bit of chatter right here? Yes. But I know from experience that if I try to clean up that chatter, coming in from here, well, I was able to clean up just a tiny bit. Often when you go to clean up those little problem areas, you end up making them worse. So you got to be able to walk away at some point from a situation and call it good enough. One thing I'm doing here is just trying to even out the way the circle looks from this perspective, which involves opening this up just slightly more. All right, that looks pretty good. Okay. Okay. Oh, a little bump in here. So now that I have the limit to how deep I can go, now I can tell how much I need to push on the outside to get it down to the right thing. Finishing hook would work well. That's the advantage of the hook shape there. Yes, potentially. On the other hand, you do need to stop at some point, and I think as long as you are aware of when you're approaching the limitations of your hook at any stage, that's really the most important skill to develop, because you can get a good shape from any hook. The question is, are you able to walk away while it's still a good shape, or do you have the tendency to push and push and push, you know? Okay, so now the question is, I think while this is still as strong as it is, I'm going to do the outside of the bowl first. Although in order to do this, I'm going to have to really press it here. So I guess the question is, right, Chuck, but the other thing is, like, if I wanted to make a deeper ladle, I could just make it slightly wider. So, yeah, as you can tell, I'm always resistant to tooling up more. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw. You can see how the hook knife described close to a perfect circle because I did it carefully. Yeah, you got to learn how to walk away. So now I'm going to use the pencil to redraw the rim to match the inner rim that I just defined. And I'm going to make that rim sort of closer to what I want the finished rim thickness to be. Oh, sorry. You can't really see what I'm doing, can you? Okay. So, just like that. Work my way around. All right. So now I have the line that I'm going to go to. Thanks, Maurice. Lovely seeing you. And so now I'm going to go around this line again. Notice that this is taking me a lot longer, and part of that is the fact that I'm not quite sure what I'm going for, but part of it is also just this form, the way I have to sort of keep drawing in the shape again and again. This form is an interesting form in that way. Now, because it's relatively delicate, when I'm taking off a small amount of material, I can, in fact, go kind of parallel, and that allows me to get a more of a smooth line to the rim. But I wouldn't do that when I'm hogging out bigger material. I would make sure that I'm going away from the rim and not parallel to the rim if I was removing a lot of material. Okay, good. Plus, I'm distracted by you. Yes, that's true. It's amazing how much longer it takes to carve something when you're describing carving it. That's a funny thing. All right, so now I've got my rim looking sweet from this direction, right? It's looking nice and trim. A little squinty squint will tell me where I need to do a little extra. When you're carving like this around the rim, you still need to start at essentially the high point in the grain, which in this case translates to the sides, and go downhill in the grain as you're doing that. Otherwise, you will split the wood. Okay, and it's looking good. Okay, now, what did I say I was going to do? Let's just trim this rim here. Get it nice and even. And you'll notice that I'm doing cuts again that I did before, and that's because spoon carving is all about sort of gradually bringing something into alignment, because the amount of alignment I'm asking for it to be here is much more nuanced than the amount of alignment I was seeking earlier when it was fatter. So as I go thinner, I'm continuing to address the alignment from each of these angles, from this angle, from this angle, from this angle, the whole thing. So you'll see me go around and around I do cuts that you've seen me do before, and it's because now that it's more delicate, I can see the nuances of making it even more even than I was before. Yeah, that's pretty good. And the more you can finesse this stage, the like final evening out stage, the more even your spoon is going to look. So it's worth spending some time doing that. Now, let's see here. I think it's worth doing the handle at this point. Because like I said, to do the handle, I'm going to have to really press this into my... It's just a cat, dogs. Chill out. I'm going to have to press this into my chest. So if I thin this out as far as I want to take it, then I might actually crunch the whole thing. So now it's time to do the handle down. So let's just start by getting this even. And we'll start to build as we come down here. But I'm not going to be able to go all the way down to the bowl like this. I'm going to shift to thumb pushes and pivots right about here. And getting something that is even and flat with a knife as opposed to using something like a draw knife, the trick is to pay attention to your edges and the line that is created. And you can see how, yeah, there we go. See how that side is nice and smooth and that side is bumpy? So that's the kind of level of detail that you need to pay attention to as you go. And if you can get that line to be nice and smooth, and then this line to be nice and smooth, and then it sort of feels approximately smooth between, that's going to fool basically everybody. Rather than trying to get it a perfect cut all the way across, focus on the edge, and then get the center about as well as you can go. Hey, Casey. So now I'm going to do thumb pivot pushes. Let's tilt this whole sucker down so you guys can see this better. Yeah, so you can see this is why I've shifted to this sort of thumb push pivot. Let's put this back here. All right, good. Can you guys see that the way I'm hoping you can see it? So thumb push pivot, and then you got to watch the tip of that knife there. You don't want to let the tip of the knife go down and strike the side there. So, and again, build it gradually towards the final line that you want, like this. So let me come back up here. And again, what I'm paying attention to is this line right there. And you can see how I got that line to land exactly where I wanted it to land. Yeah, it is. I'm curious to see how it'll work. And then same deal on the other side. And again, the line has to flow from one end to the other. So you want it to be a nice, smooth, even line. And then at this stage, it's about extending that push right down to there, just like that. Now, those bits there, I'm going to leave attached for right now. And when I carve the inner chamfer on the rim, well, I could pluck them off a little so they're not dangling in my face. But those little bits right there, I'm going to leave them attached. And when I do the inner chamfer on the rim, I'm going to come around and get them. That's how I'm going to handle that. Now in here, I think I have this idea of how it's going to go down.